Okay, good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. This is the proverbial period where we had well over 250 registrants and 200 in person. So we figure by 10 o'clock, we should have a much larger crowd here. But I appreciate everybody coming here early to get moving. My name is Jeff Weiss. I am a professor here at New York Law School, where I direct the school's New York Election, Census, and Redistricting Institute. We are going to have a program today going till about 2 o'clock to look into the American Community Survey and the census. I'm going to provide more of an overview of program in a second, but first I want to introduce Dean Anthony Crowell from New York Law School to give welcoming remarks.
Thanks so much, Professor Weiss. Really appreciate that. And welcome, everyone. I'm Anthony Crowell, the Dean and President here at New York Law School, and I thank you for joining our ACS on the Road conference. I certainly want to thank our partners who are also sponsoring today's event with us, including the U.S. Census Bureau, Population Reference Bureau, and the New York City Planning Commission, of which I'm a member. I also want to thank Engage New York, the New York State Census Equity Fund, and the New York Community Trust for their support of the law school census efforts and today's events. In addition to my role as dean, I'm also proud to serve as the faculty director for our Center for New York City and State Law, which is home to the nation's only law school-based census institute, the New York Election, Census, and Redistricting Institute, which Jeff is the director of. And I consider him to be the Dean of Census and Redistricting Law, and he is a distinguished faculty member here and does such extraordinary work. As for me, I'll just give a little background. I was actually a census field worker in 1990 during college. I have a nice connection to census. And I also, when in my role as Mayor Bloomberg's counsel in 2010, helped oversee that year's census efforts for New York City government. So I know what this conference today represents. I know the work of the Census Bureau, of the City Planning Commission, and of so many partners. And it's critical to ensuring democracy in our state, in our nation, and the work that we do informs so much of the policy choices that must be made each and every year. So I thank you not only as a citizen, but as somebody who is involved with you and really respects and appreciates what you do. I just want to say I admire Jeff so much for what he's created here at the law school, and I'm proud of what he's created at the law school. He leads the Institute's nonpartisan education, training, and assistance to New Yorkers on all aspects of the census counting process. He also taught the first ever law school class on the census, where students learned about the decennial census process as it was being conducted then in the spring of 2020. Such an easy time to teach a course, right, Jeff, during the pandemic. And it's hard to believe that the 5-year anniversary is here. But today we come together in recognition that the census is an ongoing process and not an event that takes place for a few months, once a decade. The American Community Survey has become an indispensable tool to learn about the census, our communities, and how census data is used to help determine federal, state, and local spending, and to help develop community programs that best serve so many constituencies. So I certainly extend my appreciation to everyone here serving on a panel from the Census Bureau and the Population Reference Bureau in Washington, and the panelists from New York City. We'll get to the heart of how census data is used to help plan our future. And the upcoming 2030 census will be of extraordinary consequence to that future, and these conversations are foundational to the long and vital work ahead. So thank you again, Jeff, for organizing today's program and for being a leader on this issue for our city and state and for your national recognition. I also hope all of you enjoy the program and benefit greatly from it, and we really appreciate the partnership with you and being a very constructive force in this common endeavor. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dean Crowell. Before I invite Census Bureau Regional Director Leila Dickinson to come up, just to give you a lay of the land as to what we're going to be doing this morning. We're going to have two panels followed by lunch and breakout sessions at tables in this room, taking us till just about up to 2 o'clock. The first panel will feature representatives from the Census Bureau who are going to tell you about the ACS, what it is, what it does, how you can work with it, and where it's going. The second panel to be chaired by Joel Alvarez and Diana Elliott. Joel is from New York City Planning. Diana is with the Population Reference Bureau in Washington. Will provide you with what users here in New York City do with ACS data to give you some ideas on bringing it local. And then following that, we're going to have breakout sessions at tables where we'll talk about what you do with the census data, how you can work with it, what you need, and other things. I just also want to thank all of our sponsors, and that includes, of course, the Census Bureau, the New York City Planning Department, the Population Reference Bureau, the New York Community Trust, Engage New York, the ACS Data Users Group, the CUNY Graduate Center, the State Counts Action Network, State Counts, the New York Civic Engagement Table, the New York Immigration Coalition, and the Long Island Health and Welfare Council. If any of you are here from those organizations, please just stand or wave. Thank you. Okay. So now I'm going to introduce Leila Dickinson from the Census Bureau to provide some remarks on what the Bureau is doing. Then we'll get into our first panel afterwards.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. Let me do this again. Good morning, everyone. All right. So I am just so happy to be here today and provide a few remarks about something so important and so impactful to New York City. It's great to finally put some faces to names. So I did walk around and speak to some folks, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're Layla," and so that was exciting. So thank you all for those warm welcomes. My name is Layla Dickerson. I am the director for the U.S. Census Bureau's New York Regional Office. And in my 20 plus years as a census employee, I have had the pleasure of working in various positions on a plethora of programs. But I have to tell you, the American Community Survey is my favorite. And the main reason is because ACS data is at the heart of decision making on so many levels in New York City, right? So whether it's understanding existing conditions on the ground, planning for future infrastructure, or allocating resources, all of these situations rely on ACS data to make informed decisions. So will we all agree to that? All right. So this will be one of those presentations where I'm going to ask for some audience participation. So get ready. I got my eye on some of you all. So first, I want to share a brief overview about the Census Bureau. And later, we're going to have the pleasure of receiving more detail about ACS from some of my colleagues and Donna Daly. So the U.S. Census Bureau operates 6 regional offices and employs thousands of individuals across the country supporting survey collection efforts in local communities. The New York Regional Office oversees operations, and these are the states: Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, New Jersey, New York, Puerto Rico, Rhode Island, and Vermont. So I have a question. Were you all aware that we do a PRCS of Puerto Rico? Okay, I see you shaking your head. An ACS in Puerto Rico? Raise your hand if you were aware of it. All right, great. Thank you. So let's just talk about a little bit the mission of Census Bureau, and that's to be the nation's leading provider of quality data about people and its economy. We all knew that. While most people are familiar with the decennial census, which counts every person living in the United States every 10 years, many wonder, what do we do in between those 10 years, right? So the answer is we stay very busy. We stay very busy. So, in addition to the decennial census, the Census Bureau collects data on a wide range of topics through over 130 surveys. Two of the most well-known programs is the American Community Survey, which provides detailed demographic, social, economic, and housing data, and the Current Population Survey, which is CPS, which gathers labor force employment statistics. So these surveys, along with others, help us to build a comprehensive picture of life in the United States. Every 5 years, the U.S. Census Bureau conducts the Economic Survey, and that collects vital statistics about businesses to measure their impact on the U.S. economy. And this extensive survey, sent to nearly 4 million businesses, varies across industries and geographic areas, and it's essential for understanding business activity and is a key for assessing the health of the economy. And then the Census of Governments, conducted every 5 years, provides essential data on the structure and operations of state and local governments, offering benchmark figures on public finance, employment, and fiscal relationships. So, here are a few what I'll call fun facts. Others might call them interesting facts, and then some might just simply call them facts about ACS. The detailed socioeconomic information that is collected in ACS was once collected via the decennial census, a long-form questionnaire. And then the first small scale test of the ACS in the field was in 1996, and the first national test was in 2000. The last decennial census with a long form was in 2000. And thanks to ACS, the 2010 and 2020 censuses only asked basic information: name, sex, age, date of birth, race, ethnicity, relationship, and housing tenure. Then ACS went into full implementation in 2005 with the first one-year estimates for areas of 65,000 or more people released in September 2006 for the year 2005. And in the first 5-year estimates, using data collected from 2005 to 2009, they were released in late 2010. And then the current 1 and 5-year estimates are released every fall for the previous 1 and 5-year periods. The U.S. Census Bureau's Puerto Rico Community Survey, PRCS, is part of the Census Bureau's American Community Survey, ACS, providing a detailed portrait of the social, economic, housing, and demographic characteristics of communities throughout Puerto Rico. So let's talk about ACS and the ways people can respond. So each year, the U.S. Census Bureau contacts over 3.5 million addresses nationwide to participate in ACS or PRCS. And households selected to participate receive a letter of instructions on completing the survey. Completing the survey online, it's safe, it's secure, and it's confidential. It's also cost-effective, saving taxpayers money. It's environmentally friendly, reducing paper use. It's user-friendly with helpful screens and review options. And for those who prefer not to respond online, a paper questionnaire is mailed, and the survey completion is also available by phone. So if there is no response by either method, a field representative may visit for an in-person interview. And one thing to note is that the online responses are not available for people living in Puerto Rico or institutional group quarters. So why is ACS important for New York City? Well, One thing is the urban planning and development that guides decisions in zoning and housing development, infrastructure, and public services based on, some trends. Community services and resources. It helps allocate resources for healthcare, education, social services, and transportation to meet community needs. Economic and workforce development, identifying workforce trends and economic conditions, guiding job training programs and business development. Health and public safety, assisting in tracking population trends, ensuring healthcare access and assessing community safety and emergency preparedness. Of course, census and political representation, nonprofit and community organization, as well as education and research. So the research and evaluation program at the Census Bureau continuously carries out research evaluation projects, including studies on survey methodology to enhance the accuracy of ACS and ensure reliable data for our community. So I want to talk about how we collect the data out of the New York Regional Office briefly, and that is with people. We have over 114 field representatives and 16 field supervisors collecting ACS data across the 5 boroughs and Long Island. These FRs and FSs are fluent in over 25 languages, and that includes Bengali, Cantonese, Haitian Creole, Hebrew, Portuguese, Yiddish, and American Sign Language. All right, so lastly, I want to talk about how you can, going back one. There we go. As you learn more later today, our expert staff can customize a training workshop for you or your constituents. So trainings can be done in person or via webinar. Our staff are well versed in the data tools available on our website, including Census Academy, Census Business Builder, My Congressional District, and others. And the data dissemination staff are available to our partners for events to help educate people on the uses of data, similar to what we're doing today. So lastly, I'm going to close with this contact information for some resources that I've mentioned earlier, and I'm going to give the mic back to Jeff. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. We're going to bring up our first panel in a moment, but first, just want to mention a few things. We are now in 2025. We're halfway through the decade. We're already seeing a lawsuit threatening the census. We're seeing a presidential executive order addressing the census. So, we are in for a roller coaster ride starting earlier in the decade as we ramp up to 2030, earlier than we have ever seen before. How many of you are new to the census and have not worked on one in the past? Just see a show of hands. There are a few of you. And how many of you consider yourselves knowledgeable about the census and census data? Most of you. And how many of you would be old census warriors, been around for at least the last 2 or 3 censuses? So there are a few. And I'll just say that I know of at least 3 people here, 4 people with myself included, who are now working on their 6th census cycle. Those who have done this before might have some gray hair. They know who they are. I'm not going to single them out because if I do, I'm going to forget somebody. Also, looking around the room, I noticed that this being again 2025, a lot of us here worked on the 2020 census. And we started out working together in 2018, 2019, before COVID, and we used to meet through New York Counts and over at the New York Immigration Coalition offices pretty regularly. Then COVID hit, and we all went remote. And I met so many people that I've never met person to person who I'm seeing here 5 years later. So thank you for still remaining as census warriors. We're going to now bring up the first panel. So if you would all come here, I'm going to take a seat left and join you all again near the end of the program. So Joel, Diana, and colleagues.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming here. My name is Diana Elliott, and I am Vice President of Programs at PRB. So you've seen our logo, it's kind of blasted up there. I wanted to make sure, though, and give you a little background on these ACS on the Road events, and then introduce our panel. So this is our third ACS on the Road event that we've done, and I keep challenging new places to kind of outdo their competitors, and I have to say, it's pretty great. Sorry, Texas, sorry, Utah, but New York really did a great job here. And I want to especially acknowledge 3 people who were so critical for all of the planning that went behind the scenes. That, of course, is Jeff Weiss. And our colleagues at the planning office, Joel Alvarez and Erica Moore. So I have the privilege of introducing our census colleagues who are going to give you more background on the ACS. So first up is going to be Donna Daly, who is chief of the American Community Survey Office. And she'll give a little bit of a brief introduction to the survey and discuss recent changes that have happened. After that, we get to hear from Noemi Mendez, who's a data dissemination specialist, and we'll kind of talk through some of the ways that you can interact and interface with the data. And then finally, we'll hear from Jolie Golden, who is also a data dissemination specialist, who will share ways to contact and get in touch for additional help as you might need them. So anyway, let's welcome Donna Daly.
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much. So the first thing I want to say is a special thank you to the New York City Planning Department and the New York Law School for setting up the event today with PRB and inviting us to come and talk with you today. So on the slide, oops, I got to do that myself. Okay. So there. Okay, so on the slide is an overview of what I'm going to be covering today. So since Layla provided such a very nice overview of the ACS, I'll provide an overview of the content on the ACS, the geographies that we provide data for, and our data releases. Then I'll discuss some recent changes to the program and look ahead at some potential changes down the road. And then I'll round out the presentation with some information about how we engage with data users. And then I'd be happy to answer any of your questions along with the other folks on the panel. So, content. So the content collected by the ACS can be grouped into 4 major characteristics: social, demographic, and economic, and housing. So social characteristics include topics like education, language spoken at home, and veteran status. The ACS collects demographic characteristics such as sex, age, race, and Hispanic origin. The economic characteristics include things like commuting to work, employment status, and income. And housing characteristics include topics like computer and internet usage, housing costs, and vehicles that are available for a household. So these topics are used to produce more than 1,000 tables for local communities every year. So along with the numerous topics that we cover, the ACS also provides data for more geographies on an annual basis than any other household survey available. The image on this slide shows some of those geographies for which the ACS data are produced and the relationship between them. Lower geographic areas fit neatly within the larger areas directly connected with the lines. For example, school, congressional, and state legislative districts fit neatly within states, and they don't cross state boundaries. However, they may cross boundaries of counties or metropolitan areas. In this slide, you can also see the smallest geographic building block is the block group, and that includes between 600 and 3,000 people in each of those block groups. So the ACS's unique ability to report on a wide range of geographies is what gives it such popularity and broad appeal. So data releases. So the ACS data are timely because they are released the year immediately following the year they were collected. So a thing to keep in mind is that the ACS creates period estimates, which means they represent the characteristics of the population and housing over a specific period of time during the data collection period. So as you can see here, the ACS releases our data release estimates for 1 year and 5 year periods. We completed our final 2023 data release just last week. We were very excited about that. So all of these products that you see on the screen are available to the public. So we have 3 primary data releases every year. The first one is our 1 year data release. And like Layla had mentioned, that provides estimates for geographies with populations of 65,000 or more. And that typically will occur in September of every year. The 1 year supplemental estimates are a subset of simplified ACS tables produced for geographies of populations of 20,000 or more. And they're usually released in October. And then our final and I think most popular release is our 5 year release, which provides those data for geographies of all sizes down to the block group level. And that usually occurs in December of every year. So we did have one special data release this year, which was on January 7th. We released data profiles from the 2023 ACS 1 year data for the 119th Congress. So we did this so that the states that had updated their congressional district boundaries would have this current data for their districts immediately after they were seeded in January. I think they got seeded on January 3rd, and we produced this on January 7th. So I like to give a gift to Congress, make them my friend. So let's see. Okay, so data collection changes for 2024. I'm on the right slide. Okay, so the ACS program is always looking for ways to innovate how we collect and produce our data. So I'd like to share some information about the recent innovations that we've made to the program. In 24, for the first time, respondents living in group quarters facilities, non-institutional group quarters facilities, such as college, university, student housing, group homes, military barracks, workers group homes, and Job Corps centers, emergency and transitional centers, they can respond to the ACS online. So this makes responding to the ACS a lot easier for the people sampled within these facilities, and it also helps those administrators be our friends also. Another change to our data collection operation in 24 is that we began using administrative records for the acreage question. So this question still appears on our paper form, but it's skipped in the automated instruments when we have administrative data that indicates the acreage for the sampled address. This applies to both the internet data collection instrument as well as our computer-assisted personal interviewing instrument that is for our non-responding addresses. That's the main operation that we run out of the New York Regional Office for ACS. So let's see. So next I'm going to talk about our content that changed on the ACS and in 2025. But before I do that, I'd like to briefly discuss how content is modified or added to the ACS. So the ACS content is designed to meet the needs of federal government agencies, and it's a rich source of local area information as a bonus. However, constraining the content of the ACS is critical due to the mandatory reporting requirement and the burden on the American public. So approximately every 5 years, the ACS program solicits federal agencies for proposed changes to the survey. These are tested through a field test, through a content test, and we test it's a testing, research, and evaluation process, and we are determining the best wording, format, and placement of these new and proposed revisions to existing questions on the ACS. It ensures that each new or modified question has been carefully considered, fully tested, and will collect the quality data without reducing overall respondent participation. The most recent content test was in 2022, which included 11 different topics. We had 6 person level topics and 5 housing level topics. Each topic underwent cognitive testing And all but 3 of those topics, which were condo fees, home heating fuel, and journey to work, were tested in a field test. The cognitive testing showed that people understood what we were trying to do with the condo fees, the home heating fuel, and the journey to work. So field testing was not necessary for those 3. And those 3 were implemented on our 24 ACS last year. So the approved changes to the remaining of those 11 topics were submitted and implemented in 2025. We have evaluation reports from that test, from that big content test for each of the topics, and they're all available online on our content changes webpage. Okay, so new content for 2025. So based on the results of the 22 content tests, there's currently 3 new questions for sewer, electric vehicles, and solar panels that we added in January of 25. 4 questions had relatively minor modifications, which were primarily changes to either their layouts or their instructions to provide clarity for the respondents filling out the form or answering the questions online. And for efficiency today, I'm just going to focus on the new questions. If you want to hear about the other ones, we can talk offline or at a break or something. So the first one is our sewer question. So this was requested by the Environmental Protection Agency and the Food and Drug Administration. It was formally appeared on the census in 1970, 1980, and 1990. And prior to this, it was being collected by the American Housing Survey, but that survey does not provide the same level and lower level geographies that the ACS provides. So the data are critical for understanding the wastewater infrastructure in the country and in rural and smaller communities. The data also allows for monitoring of water quality and potential environmental impacts, such as seepage into the surrounding soil. Okay, solar panels. The solar panels question was requested by the Energy Information Administration. A similar question is asked on the American Housing Survey, as well as the Residential Energy Consumption Survey. But they, again, only produce estimates at either the national level or for select metro areas. The data from this question will help EIA match energy consumption to energy production across the U.S. And then finally, the third one we added was the electric vehicles question. And that was requested again by the Energy Information Administration. They were busy the last few years, which is tasked to determine the current national energy supply and whether it meets the needs of the country. So determining the prevalence of electric vehicle ownership at the housing unit level helps multiple agencies understand the energy supply, demand, and current technology of energy resources when making projections for future energy needs for the country. Understanding energy consumption at lower levels will also help federal agencies make the technological and capital changes necessary within that infrastructure. Okay, so the next one, now I'm going to shift focus and discuss some plan changes for the ACS. So for the first time since 1997, on March 28th, 2024, the Office of Management and Budget, or we fondly refer to them as OMB, they issued new standards for maintaining, collecting, and presenting race and ethnicity data across federal agencies. And the Census Bureau follows these standards, so this is a very noteworthy change. The ACS program announced in November of 24 that we plan to implement those finalized SPD 15 standards in the 2027 ACS data collection cycle. And we will be following the requirements that were outlined by that those revisions to the standard. So what does this mean for the ACS data users? So what that means is the first 1 year estimates produced using the updated standards will be the 2027. So therefore the 1 year products will be published in September of 2028. And then the first 5 year estimates that will be produced solely using the updated standards will be the 27 to 31 ACS 5 year data, and that's scheduled for release in late 2032. So you may be asking yourself, well, what am I supposed to do between that and when they're fully 5 years of data? So until the ACS has 5 years of data collected using the updated standards, we're going to be producing ACS 5 year estimates using a bridging technique please don't ask me about it because I am not the expert in that and what that bridging technique does. But I know that we've done it before and we bridge data either forwards or backwards sometimes at the Census Bureau for our 5-year products. So that is the plan for that. And then engaging with data users. I'd like to share some information about how we engage with our data users. We are committing to supporting each and every one of you, and we keep you in mind in everything that we do. We have lots of ways to access data, but we also have many ways to support you, and I'm going to highlight a few of those today. So first is our data users group. It is a great way to stay abreast of what's going on the ACS and connect with other data users who are a great source of information and advice about working with the data. The group has a website and an online community with over 6,000 members, and it's free and open to all ACS data users. The group is maintained by our friends at the PRB, Population Reference Bureau, in partnership with the Census Bureau and my office. And I'll be sharing a QR code that you can put your phone up and grab how to join that if you'd like to on the next slide. And then next, in consultation with PRB and members from our ACS Data Users Steering Committee, we host an ACS Data Users Conference every other year, and it's this year. So we're holding this year's conference on May 29th, which is going to be completely virtual. And then June 3rd, which is the following Tuesday, it'll be in person in the Washington, D.C. area. And it's a great opportunity to engage with us and hear about the amazing things that people are doing with ACS data. We have lots of fun presentations. So I really do hope you consider joining us, and registration will be available in a couple months. And then finally, we have been working with PRB to organize events just like this, which we fondly refer to as ACS on the road. It gets us out of the DC area and into the areas and to talk to the local folks and how you're using our data. I get so jazzed about these kinds of things. When I go back, I get like this whole energy going because I'm providing a service and my area is providing a service for the country. And I hear so much about that here at these events. And sometimes you get complacent at doing the day-to-day job, and then you come to an event like this, and I get so much energy from these things. I hope we can do more of them. The last thing I want to mention, I also want to highlight, we have a new ACS course. It is, we just completed it in December, or I think the last one went live in December of 2024. And the course is called Discovering the ACS, and it provides a comprehensive overview of the ACS. It has 6 modules that give a comprehensive overview of topics like geography, data products, guidance for data users, unique products like the ACS summary file and the PUMS file. And it's a great way for somebody to just kind of get a crash course on using the ACS data. But anyway, we also give you a certificate that you can download and put in a frame and put in your office if you'd like to after completion. So anyway, the modules are up there on the slide. And then finally, I want you to stay in touch with us. So one way is by telling us how you use your data from the ACS. If you or your organization have used the ACS data to make an important decision, either helping your community or expand a business, we'd love to hear about it. We publish our share your stories on our website so that other folks can see exactly how important the data are and showcase different ways that the data is used. So I'm really excited to hear from our panelists today and how they're using ACS in their work. And so everyone here should feel free to share your data story with us. So I also wanted to invite you to join our ACS Data Users Group. I had mentioned before, it's a website and an online community with over 6,000 members. It's free, and we'd love for you guys to join us. So, and that's that. Thank you very much.
Everyone, my name's Noemi Mendez, like not having an Emmy, no Emmy. I'm with the Center for Enterprise Dissemination. How do I get to the? Sure. Yeah, and I need a web browser too. I'm from Brooklyn originally, and I studied geography and GIS, so that's my background. I went to Syracuse and then, thank you. And then my family kept asking, what am I going to do to degree in geography? So then I went to Hunter College and studied GIS, and then I wound up at the Census Bureau. This is my 22nd year.
Okay. Which, no problem fixing this.
I'm with second, again, so I'm with the Center for Enterprise Dissemination, the Dissemination Outreach Branch. So we're the ones that administer data.census.gov, the API and MDAT. I'm the one that advocates for like mapping. So we've come a long way. So I'm very proud. So I'm going to talk about the latest updates and do a brief demo and future enhancements, and we'll leave question and answers for later. So you can always come by the table and I'll give you our card. So this is our data user feedback cycle. So we are always collecting, receiving and feedback, and we get that from programs like this and from our emails. Then we prioritize and distribute issues to prioritize and incorporate into the system. Then that goes to our developers, which we couldn't do our job without our developers. And then I'm part of the internal testing team, so making sure things work and that they make sense and that they're answering the questions that people are asking, and finally releasing it to the public. So I'm going to start kind of like a little brief update on MDAT, our microdata access tool. So we did a refreshed tool and it was updated to appear more consistent with the rest of the site. The refreshed MDAT is accessible at this link. So you'll see it's at data.census.gov/app/MDAT. We've done a lot of work on data.census.gov, and these are the developmental updates as of May 2023. So we have, we've added an address search, and I'm going to do a really brief demo on what that looks like. We've improved our mapping. There's an ACS message on the top of the table in map. We have some profiles and an apps tab. I really like our profiles. Whenever I work with the data user, I always try to show the profiles because it's a good kind of universal overview of data for the geography that they're looking for. We have a new pop pyramid app, which is on the profile. So if you haven't seen that, if you work with teachers, they really love this because a lot of them use that pop profile when they're looking at demographics of where their students live. We have a cite button, so you can cite the data very easily in different formats, and API buttons. Excuse me. You can download the table in the profile and map. We have an improved download output, and then a filter panel redesign. So if you want to know more about what's going on, you can go to the URL and see the updates, the documentation. Also, we're highlighting our bar and column charts. And I know for some of us who are advanced users, we may not use these, but when I'm working with the public and they're putting together a report, if I'm working with a student, I always show them the bar and column chart. So this is a way you can visualize the selected data in either horizontal or vertical bars. And it's included are the options you can sort the data in ascending, descending, and alphanumeric order. And it's really cool. So check it out. So here's the address search. I'll show the slides and then I'll just show you the real quick demo. So it's right on our landing page. It's a little location button. So you just put in the address that you're looking for. So it geocodes it and it gives you like the top 10, 12 different types of popular geographies. So it'll give you the ZICTA, the zip code tabulation area, what urban area, places, the block group, and census tract. So when I'm working with the data user and they said, well, I'm looking for data for my school, but I don't know what census tract is in, this is probably the fastest way to do it. I'm so used to pulling up a GIS map and doing it that way, but this is really quick and easy. We have an improved maps. So now the variables are organized in a readable list. It's very clean. The interfacing is very nice. It works really well. it allows you to map all the columns of the corresponding table. So you can just kind of like switch between columns very easily. And you can switch between percent and estimate, and then the unit. So you can also go that way and it works super fast. So your map will change dynamically. We have new selection tools. So now you can do a box, you can do a radius, or you can draw a lasso. So if you want to get a collection of geographies fairly quickly, you can do that. And then this is just what the lasso tool looks like. For those of people who want to do a print, you can provide a PDF of the map. So if you don't see the whole bar on your screen, just hit the 3 dots and go to more tools, and you'll see you can go to the print and it'll give you a PDF with some documentation about the data. Okay. Oh, my favorite, the GeoJSON. I know a lot of people who do GIS have been waiting for this. So now we have that available that gives you information in the association. It gives you the GeoJSON format that you can throw into your GIS system. Okay. You can also now, maps are improved. You can edit the map title and then move and collapse the map legend. So you can physically go in and type in, this is what my map is, and just type that in. And then you can move or collapse the map legend. So it's pretty dynamic and it works really fast. Here's the ACS message that I talked about previously. So you view the top of the ACS table for new text that explains that sometimes the ACS estimates are only available. We get a lot of questions like, why do I only see 1 year? And we always remind them those are for the geographies of 65,000 and over. But obviously if you pick a geography that has 1 in 5 years, you can switch between the two of them. This is the cite and API buttons. So for citations, we provide MLA, APA, Chicago, Harvard, BibTeX, and RefMan citations. You just click the tab and it'll automatically cite it for you. Here's the API button. So now you can go ahead and produce an API call right there from when you're pulling your table. So you can go ahead and you can send that to other people as well. To access the download in the profile view, you can click the little show table button and then download your table. Okay. And then to access the download in the map view, you can click the table button at the top of the map and then scroll down. It's very small. It'll say download table button. So now you have 2 options from the table and from the map. We've also improved the download output, and this has been one of my pet peeves as a data user as well. When you see that null table, so we've cleaned it up. It's no longer there. Now it itself is null, not there. New profiles and apps table. So now you can do right from the landing page. So for this example, I just typed in Texas, right? So you can see the profiles. It gives you kind of popular profiles, but then you can go to the profile itself and it gives you all sorts of information. I'm sorry, I speak with my hands. So then you can get that information. And then also if you scroll down to the apps section, you can go to the microdata, MDAT, or you can use our population pyramids. That little app is also in the system. We've really worked hard on redesigning our filter side panel for data users because it can get very frustrating to find the geographies. So now the filter subcategories are shown by default. The filters with the chevrons, those are the ones that open up more, will give you more detailed options to choose from the filters and check the boxes to search selections. And I think that's probably the biggest hurdle that data users have is they don't know like where to start. So we're kind of trying to guide them as well. And I always tell people as a data user, as a geographer, start with your geography first, right? That's sort of like the best thing to do it. To get email updates from our division, this is our Gov Delivery site. You can also do the little QR code and it'll take you to this. And I really like this because we update these every month. So every month you're going to be seeing like what's coming down the pipe and what's been released. Upcoming enhancements, we really love user feedback. I always tell people, if I can give you our card too that has our email address. I'm one of like the 4 people we do answer emails, and we love feedback because that tells us how do we make the tool better. We want the tool to work for data users, so we need to know what do data users want, right? We're adding additional visualizations. That's been really important. A lot of people have really liked that. We're working on new apps, and we are really working on MDAT to make it easier to use, a little bit more understandable, because the information that's on MDAT is really important. So we want people also to be aware of that tool. So we've designed the look so you can tell from when it used to look like, now it looks more like data.census.gov. So the interface is a little bit cleaner, it's a little easier to read. Okay, so we want to make it to look consistent with the rest of the site. So again, this is our address that goes to my section. It's census.data@census.gov. So if you have any questions, you can't find anything, or you want to give us feedback, please feel free. We will get back to you. And again, how to stay connected to us. Okay, so let's see if I can get on the internet. The IT person needs help. We'll let you. That's okay. It's gonna be really quick.
No worries.
At our favorite site. Oh, no caps. So right here, right on the main page, some people have, you kind of look over this because it's kind of small. So you see this little kind of like location. This is where you put an address for I work a lot with like nonprofits and other organizations and schools. And I said, I want to get census data for my school. Like, how do I do that? Right. So you just put in your address. I think it's 1001. We first did this for a conference for teachers, and they were so excited. And then every teacher came up and was like, how do you show me how do you do it for my school in my school? So we had like a long line of data users, and that was like really amazing. So, okay, so you have your ZICTAs, urban area places, legislative districts, blocks. Here's a congressional district, state, block group, CSAs, county subdivision, and census tract. So I'm just going to click on the hyperlink for census tract. Okay. So you have all of your information here. So it gives you can get the decennial data, you can view the results. And here are the tables that are associated with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and view the result. And then you can go right to your tables from here. So which is really nice. You know, it always starts off with the decennial, but you can go and click any table. So the information's right there. So it's super easy. I think that's all I really had. So if you want to talk afterwards, I'll be around. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just one.
Okay.
Great. Hi, everyone. And Naomi, thanks so much for showing us all your whole bag of tricks. We're always so excited when there are new updates, especially to a tool like MDAT, which I demonstrate often. And so the more friendly it is, the better, both for me and for all of you. I'm Jolie Golden. I'm a data dissemination specialist. I'm based in Manhattan. I serve New York City, Long Island, sometimes a little bit north, Westchester. I have colleagues across the country, so there are 27 of us. We're part of the data dissemination team branch. And my colleague further north in New York State, who serves Western New York, and does more traveling, is Amy Brombos. My colleague in New Jersey, who some of you may have met, a master geographer, David Craker. He also sometimes comes into the city, but we are here to serve you, and I'm here to help connect you and connect the public to census data. So if you have questions about data tools, if you have questions about how to find topics. If you're looking for training, I do a lot of online and in-person training on census data tools. That can be for a small group or for a very large audience like this one. I spent 2 years as a partnership specialist, helping count everyone once, only once, and in the right place in 2020. I want to thank all of you who participated in that effort and partnered with us. But we continue to have so much data to share, including a lot of that decennial data that was released, frankly, not that long ago. So I've been helping people in the city dive into not only ACS data, how to find data hyperlocally, how to create thematic maps of census tracts, and then overlay things like boundaries, like the 119th Congressional District, for example. So in terms of whether you want to get to know your local community through census data, whether you're looking for business data and accessing our business tools like Census Business Builder, County Business Patterns, et cetera, I'm your person here in New York City. And I look at all of you and I think there could be a potential training out there and we could work together, which would be amazing. So I help local government agencies, nonprofits, students, businesses, and more on a weekly basis. Some of those requests come in through our Ask Data portal. We do answer those questions and we do set up trainings through that. We also do a lot of work with Census Academy. So that's what's showing here. That's census.gov/academy. You can access short training videos. So even if you spend time with me or another data dissemination specialist, there's also a ton of resources online. The data gems are short, usually 4 to 8 minutes. And the courses, Donna had mentioned one of our courses, which we're thrilled. I think it's 6 parts, which is basically discovering the American Community Survey. You can also go deep into our API through an online course. What I also am here to do is to field your more difficult questions and connect into subject matter experts at the Census Bureau to help answer those questions. So I'm more of a generalist. I don't have expertise. I have some expertise, but I don't know every tool in and out. But when I get that question from the Bureau of Labor Statistics about how can we get the best data for under 60th Street in Manhattan for people coming in and out commuting, I can reach out to people who can make sure that we get exact answers to those questions. So I also wanted to mention that we have national webinars. There's a really good one coming up on Thursday at 2 o'clock. I happen to be moderating the chat on that one, which is measuring poverty using Census Bureau data. So I put my email address up there. It's jolie.r.golden@census.gov. I have a lovely virtual card that I'm happy to share with you. So please come and find me during the break. I'm eager to connect and help you better access census data. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you here. My name is Lillian Kildup. I'm a research analyst at the Population Reference Bureau, and I'm going to provide a quick overview of the ACS online community that was mentioned before. I'm just going to go into a deeper dive of it, and hopefully, if I have time, go around the site and give you a quick demo of how you can access resources on our website. This is an overview of what I'm going to go over today. So the features of the online community, the main feature of the online community is the discussion forum. Next is another tab called ACS Resources. And then we have a tab for webinars and conferences. Next, I'll talk about moderation and preventing spam and your first discussion forum post and how that relates. How to join, most importantly, become a member and choose your email digest options. And as you can notice, there's a big old QR code that's going to navigate you to the ACS online community in case you want to follow along with this demo of that ACS online community. So let me go ahead and click over to that website. We actually just updated the website. It has a great look and feel compared to the older website. Here is the home page. You can see this is the description. We are, this website is a partnership with the US Census Bureau. The purpose of this website is to share information between data users, get announcements from the Census Bureau, and also just talk about the value and utility of the ACS overall. Again, we run this in partnership with the US Census Bureau, and anyone can join, and it's free to join. Here is a helpful part of the home page. It's our FAQs. Our FAQs are actually based on the most viewed discussion forum posts in the discussion forum. I'll show you that. Then we have a quick preview of the latest discussions in that discussion forum. You can see the posts and replies. And then we have a link to the Census Bureau website, so that's convenient. In the discussion forum, you'll see the posts again. You can see that there are Census Bureau staff that post helpful updates about the ACS. And then we have our data users. They're creating posts and they can respond to, you as data users can respond to these posts. They can be questions or comments. Let's go to one of the posts here. You can see a question from this data user about group quarter population. And once you become a member, you can add a reply. You also need to become a member to post in the discussion forum itself. Here's some details over here. And then we always have this sidebar with more links. Going to go to ACS resources. This is just a huge collection of ACS resources and links to them. We have PRB resources, state data center resources. We have links to all of the ACS handbooks. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but that is also a really great resource to look at things like the general handbook. But we also have handbooks that are catered to certain data users, like Congress, for example. We hold webinars, and also the Census Bureau, of course, holds webinars. And you can see the recording and even the slides in these links. Again, the Census Bureau webinars are also linked on this website, so it's a nice one-stop shop for all of these things. You can see the recording, and that's actually me talking about the ACS online community. A description, and then here we have the slides. You can download those. Kind of like the webinars, we have a conferences page. I mentioned before, we're going to have a 2025 ACS Data Users Conference. So if you can't make it, we are also live streaming that conference as well. The first day is actually going to be completely virtual. The really exciting part of this page too is that we have all of our past conferences on here. And within these pages, there are actually all of the recordings and all of the presentations again. So this is a huge resource if you haven't been to an ACS conference and you would like to look at the information. We have a steering committee, and here's just a description of their names and what they do. I'm going to go back to my presentation and talk about preventing spam. So like we mentioned, there's over 6,000 members, and we started noticing that there were spam posts. And to prevent that, we began monitoring the site. And it's not moderated by bots, it's moderated by humans, including me. So we really care about the posts that are in that community, and we don't want your email, if you decide to get that email digest, we don't want it clogged up with unnecessary information or ads. In this way, though, your first discussion forum post will be moderated. And we check the moderation key very often, but just to let you know, it may take a moment for that post to be posted. A lot of the posts get very quick replies. So it's a great resource. And also, I don't know if you've noticed, but if you ever Google a question about the ACS, a lot of times the ACS online community comes up as the first result. Finally, if you would like to join, it's a really easy process. Actually, I have a screenshot of it here. You create a username, email address, and then we like to know who is joining the ACS online community, just the data user group. And let me go back to here. I mentioned before, you can customize your email digest. So if you don't want to get notifications every single time there's a discussion forum post, you can opt out of that. But also, if you would like to stay up to date to these announcements and questions, you can subscribe to our email digest. All right, I hope I didn't go over time. It was great talking to you all today. I'm so glad you all came. This is my email. Thank you.
Wonderful. So now we want to open it up to questions from all of you. So there's 2 microphones positioned here. Ask questions of, yep, these will be turned on. Do they need to do anything special to turn these on? They all on? Right. Yeah. Perfect. Great. Go ahead, introduce yourself and then.
John Mollenkoff from City University Graduate Center. Have you ever thought of putting out a PUMS file by congressional district? And if you had thought about that, what's the process of maybe moving to produce one?
So that's a first. I've never actually heard that request before. However, I don't know what it would take in order to do something like that. That's the first time I've heard that. So, but that is an interesting question or request. I've got some experts back at headquarters that are my PUMS experts that would totally enjoy digging into that particular request. So I can take that back. That would be great. Okay, sounds good.
Beat you to it. Let's see, is this working? Yeah. Joel Alvarez, Department of City Planning, or New York City Department of City Planning. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting to hear how you're using administrative data to get the acreage information, and it's a cool automated process where if that administrative data already exists, then a respondent doesn't have to bother with that question, as I understood it. That sounds so great, and eliminating or diminishing respondent burden. Great idea. Are there other questions that are under consideration? Could you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
those other characteristics that are under consideration to lean on administrative records? Thanks.
Yes. Yes. So we do have lots of research going on, especially with the housing characteristics. So the reason that we chose acreage first, we had super high quality data for acreage. A lot of people, many in this room, probably don't know the acreage for the dwelling that you are living in, right? But we have really good administrative data for pretty much the entire country. So when we see it, we replace it if they're actually different and we know that the admin record is really high quality and it's significantly different than the one that was given by a respondent, we'll swap it out. So it really is a nice tool. The other thing that we have gained by using acreage is laying this framework for how we're going to use the methods provided on how we're going to use administrative records during data collection, depending on the quality of the data that we get from the admin records. But we're chasing down a lot of different housing unit, value of home, what comes to mind. We get a lot of good real estate administrative records, some other things that are in the housing section. Income is, of course, always touted about as like, that would be so much fun to be able to, get income. There's a lot to unpack there, though, with even just reference periods of the ACS and then the reference period of the tax return data from the IRS. During our 22 content test, we did test reference period, to put it in, like last calendar year, every single, question. So that we did actually test that. We put that on pause, though, until we can do more research with whether or not we're going to be able to change something with reference period with the IRS. So, but we're moving in a direction that is positive with administrative records usage.
I just wanted to ask, thank you very much. I wanted to ask a quick follow-up, and I don't know if it's a quick answer, but there's a challenge there since it's not a survey response, right? So one of the things I hope we can address with our panel discussion is how we deal with the challenge of sampling reliability. And so how do you, when incorporating administrative records like acreage, how do you represent that the uncertainty?
Yeah, that uncertainty will be captured probably through like an allocation flag, while we're processing the data. So I mean, we'll notate it. It's not like we're just going to do it without notating it. So.
My name is Craig. So I'm interested in integration questions also. Like I believe that gentleman asked about certain data. Okay, so for example, what about integration with all the New York State election boards? What about integration with outside vendors, in particular two, Ancestry.com and the the LDS Church? Is there any, and thirdly, I realize this is new, but computer vision, integrating computer vision into it to get different pictures of also what's going on. Has there been any talk? So in other words, what we're driving at here really is a large language model of everything. Has this question come up? And what about integration particularly? And let me throw Google into that too. So you got Google, Ancestry, and the LDS Church. Has there been any integration there with anything the Census Bureau is doing?
Not that I'm aware of. However, I do know that our associate director for research and methodology is chasing down a lot of that large language modeling and statistical products for data that already exists and census data, and how to blend that data together in order to create new data products. That is a huge modernization effort that is happening right now at the Census Bureau. those particular data items that you mentioned, Google and LDS Church and Ancestry, not sure if those are in that mix, but I do know that the concept and the idea of using as much data as possible in order to create new data products is being addressed and
Thank
worked
you.
on.
Thank
Okay, sure.
Okay. I don't, so hi, my name is May and I'm with the Chinese Progressive Association. So my question is also related to housing, particularly about the data for those in congregate housing or temporary housing. So the congregate could be permanent or temporary. And when I say temporary housing, for example, homeless shelters.
I had the same question.
Okay, so transitional shelters, that's, so unfortunately, the ACS does not count. We don't have as part of our sample transitional shelter. I mean, the homeless population is not included in the sample for the ACS. So if they are in those transitional shelters, they are captured in the group quarters sample piece.
There are adults who live in congregate housing permanently.
Like group homes, is that what you're, yes, those are captured in our group quarter sample. So we do have data specifically on group quarters across the country, institutionalized and non-institutionalized group quarters facilities. And we do publish tables and statistics specifically about group quarters every year.
So, hello. So my name is Andrea. I'm also in New York City Department of New York City Department, DCP. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. I don't like being in the middle of everything. In question of the 1 year versus 5 year ACS, I have an understanding that you send the survey based on address. Let's say you're a student, you're living in one quarter, you're signing up, you're filling out the form. Let's say within the 2 year span, you move to a whole nother state and you also get that data. I know we have to write the names up. Do you include the person taking the survey twice, or would it be different when it's all collected for a 5 year span?
So the 5 year data is based on 5 1-year data products. Okay. And then they do their magic and provide a 5-year period estimate for those single 5-year, 1 year periods. So the situation I think you're describing is if I'm a student and I live in student housing and I go to a university and then I transfer and now I'm in a different state or I graduated and now I moved out of state and I also fell in sample, either group quarters or housing unit level. Yes, your data is in both of those files for both of those 1-year files. So therefore, yes, that person is inside of that 5-year data product.
So you don't base on what is the newer
No.
survey that they provided?
No, we do not. We don't update something from a previous year because you moved. We don't. SIP chases movers. I worked on SIP for 10 years and we will hunt you down across the country to go find you, right? But we don't do that. We don't follow movers.
Okay.
And I think it's important to keep in mind too that the ACS is address-based sampling.
Right. Yeah, so if you fall in sample, we say that you can fall in sample once every 5 years and no more often than that. However, if you move, all bets are off. So.
Great. I think this is our last question before we go to break.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Joseph. I'm with the New York Civic Engagement Table. So I think I understand what the new race standards will be for the upcoming change. One question on multiracial respondents. So currently the breakdown is by the number of races they choose. With the new version, will there be any further breakdown of that? I think right now it's currently 2 or more races, 3 or 4, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it's still multiracial.
Okay.
So they will still break down. I did earmark that just in case I got a question about the race standards.
Any further refinement as to like which races were chosen for the multiracial?
You mean like what does the standard say about additional categories and things like that?
Let's see.
So here's one thing. Let me share this. By law, the census and the decennial census and the ACS, regardless of what the standard says, we have to ask some other race. Okay, so that's a category that not all demographic surveys have to use. We have to ask some other race. Every race that is listed, and there's 6 race categories, they are all multi-selectable, right? When it gets processed, a lot of that is based on what is selected. If you select more than one, it's multiracial. And if you write in a code, you know, you're doing a write-in, there's like a coding operation that is coding that write-in into races as well. So does that help answer your question?
Maybe I'll talk with one of you afterwards.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Thank you.
Diana, we just have one online.
Oh, perfect. Yep, go ahead.
So how are data and the respondents being protected so that they're not intimidated in answering the survey, and that their data is protected after they've answered the survey?
We have, well, depending on what operation we're talking about. So we have the paper form. The entire operation is protected by Title 13 and the confidentiality laws in which the Census Bureau operates under. We do not use names during processing. A lot of data is stripped out. Any kind of identifiable information is stripped out before we process the data. So there should be no fear of anybody reporting and having names associated with data. It is all collapsed for statistical purposes only. And we have very super well-trained field reps that will share our confidentiality laws and regulations that we work under as well, to help alleviate any fears that people have with providing the data to the Census Bureau. And this goes for all surveys, not just the American Community Survey. All of our surveys are protected under these same laws and regulations.
Great. Well, thank you all for your questions. Thank you, especially to our panelists. Great. You want to say something before? Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much. We're going to take about a 10-15-minute break and come back at 10:45. Let me just mention one thing to keep in perspective. As you learned about the ACS and the data, when you go back to your organizations and communities, it's important to familiarize your constituencies with census information, throughout the decade. New York lost only 1 congressional district after 2020. Based on Census Bureau estimates, New York can lose at least 2 districts going into 2030, and it could change to the worse between now and 2030. We don't know. New York had 45 congressional districts during World War II. We're now down to 26, the same number as New York had in the 1820s. New York holds the record of losing 5 districts in 1980 when I first started. That was a big hit. Luckily, New York had a good census count in 2020, yet we were told that we had an overcount. Yet the estimates now show we're losing 100,000, 300,000 people since 2020. So it's important to constantly train people on the census so that we don't find out in 2031 that people forgot to respond, that they didn't know what it was about, that they lost the form, they didn't see it, all the reasons we hear for low response rates. So let's really ramp up a lot sooner and work with ACS data as a great tool to familiarize communities with what census data is all about and why it's important to them. I think you're all on the same page with me. I can go on and on. Just want to make that message. So we'll take a break and come back for our second panel at 10:45. Thank you.
On improving the way that they can communicate with and serve the many New Yorkers who have language barriers. So there was a book that came out last year called Language City. It suggested that roughly 10% of the world's 7,000 languages are spoken in New York City. And obviously very diverse. But what the ACS has been a wonderful tool and partner in doing is helping us provide better data so that we can understand what languages are across New York City, where they are, and how better to agencies can serve those communities. It's an incredible challenge. I think one of the challenges with language is that it's often an afterthought. Even across the work that we do and in our collaboration with many of the community organizations, some of whom are represented here. But also it's a challenge of scale, diversity, and also distribution. One of the wonderful things that the Department of City Planning has put out recently with ACS data is this population map viewer looking at the distribution of limited English proficiency. There's a saying about the futures here is just unevenly distributed. Language barriers are an important part of the work that New York City is doing because of the linguistic diversity. Roughly, according to the ACS, 22% of New Yorkers have limited English proficiency, but that can range from 3% to 60%. And it's certainly concentrated in certain communities. What those languages are is also a challenge. 7,000 languages is not something that the ACS naturally will collect. But in working with city planning and ACS, the data quality is always very important in their conversations. And so there is a certain balancing. Just as an example of some of the work that we do across the agencies where we use data or where they use the data is, for example, parks will put up signage in various languages based on ACS data. DOT recently in a conversation was talking about how they do community outreach and they have community ambassadors and they assign certain regions their bilingual staff based on ACS data. Moya started a pilot that was taken over by the Civic Engagement Commission to deliver a poll site interpretation to supplement what the Board of Elections does in many of the languages that are not designated by the Voting Rights Act, which is from 1965. So you can imagine some languages that were designated back then were not included. So Haitian Creole, Russian are not languages that the Board of Elections would cover. So Moya and then the Civic Engagement Coalition work to fill the gaps. But as we move forward with trying to close these gaps, the data that ACS provides is really critical in making sure that agencies are providing the communications they need to in the appropriate languages. It's the basis of our local law 30, which is the guiding standards for language access across New York City. There are 10 designated citywide languages that use a combination of ACS data and Department of Education data. And as our work has grown, language access, we could say, is about a 25-year-old endeavor now. In the recent years, New York City has always been at the forefront, but this is a field that has been growing. New York State created an Office of Language Access 2 years ago. New Jersey passed a law on language access last year. Illinois and Michigan also passed laws last year. So this is an arena that is only growing. It's really critical to the work that we do to make sure that services are delivered in an equitable manner, communications and language barriers are addressed. and that this language access is not an afterthought. So the data is really a critical part of making sure that people are thinking about that, and also in part of the efforts to make sure that their programs are delivering for every New Yorker. I'll leave it at that, but the partnership that we have with city planning and using the language data is an incredible resource in a very challenging arena to identify and help work with the community organizations and the New Yorkers who have these language barriers.
Thank you very much, Ken. Let me ask just a very quick follow-up because I was interested to hear the city supports 10 top languages. Does the ACS play a role in determining those top languages?
Yes, the local authority designates 10 languages. It's based on ACS data. We use the five-year average for the stability of the data. We do combine it with DOE data in part to reflect the more recent trends on language access. So like Bengali is weighted more highly in DOE than in the census data. And I think this is sort of also an evolving arena because as other jurisdictions, including New Jersey, New York State, have expanded their language access efforts, they are typically using census data exclusively. So we're looking at how to align better so that all the jurisdictions are using the same.
Thank you very much. Okay, it was also a good reason we could test out the mics here too. Okay, so going on to John Molenkoff, Distinguished Professor of Political Science and Sociology at CUNY's Graduate Center and Director of the School's Center for Urban Research.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here, Joel, and to the PRB folks. I'm one of those gray-haired people that Jeff was talking about at the beginning of the event. My first job in New York City was in the Department of City Planning as a director of the Economic Development Division, which was right alongside the kernel of the Population Division that was being developed at that same time. And a colleague at that time, Frank Vardy, was drawing hand-drawn maps of the emerging immigrant communities of New York City based on the 1980 census. And I even have a couple of those squirreled away that I think I'll share with Joel to see if they want to put them up on the walls that sit in the new city planning office. But since that time, I've been working at the City University Graduate Center. Not sure how familiar you are with it. We have 35 different PhD programs, a bunch of master's programs, mainly focused in the humanities and social sciences at our building at the corner of Fifth Avenue and 34th Street. The sciences are mainly located on campuses where they can have laboratories, and there's a very strong focus across the different disciplines on using New York City as a laboratory for understanding all kinds of different processes ranging from linguistic to sociological to political. And the Center for Urban Research had its beginnings as the first local affiliate of the New York State Data Center in the initial way that the Census Bureau was thinking about disseminating at the beginning was computer tapes. We would get, big IBM computer tapes from Albany and help our users understand them. Thank goodness that we've transitioned to a period where you can just go online and get everything. And hats off to the Census Bureau for making this data so easily available. The Center for Urban Research does a lot of research on its own and also serves as a consultant to different city agencies, including the Department of Education, but also the various labor force training activities of the city. I'm particularly interested in what originally caused us to have a census, which was to allocate seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. And the census really is a founding document for political representation at all levels, including New York City, which redistricts its city council seats every 10 years, just as the state legislature across the country reapportion the legislative seats. So on the left side, it is a sort of conceptual dynamic of a diagram of one of the things that we do. We're very interested in taking the ACS data and augmenting it with data from other sources to enrich our ability to draw lessons from it. So one of the major things that we focus on is the voter registration roll for the city of New York. It's the closest thing we have to a European-style population registry. There, in very round numbers, there are about 4 million registered voters in New York City. So about 80% of the people who are voting age may be represented in that. And it's public information. There's a statewide website where you can go and ask for all the registered voters in the state of New York if you want to analyze them. We geocode the addresses of the voters, so we know what block they live in, what census tract they live in, all the other districts that may contain them. And we also look at the voter history. There's a separate file that records each time you vote. I'm sure you all have your little barcodes when you go into the polling place and get them recorded. There's a separate file that records when people vote. So we not only know who's registered, but we know who's actually voted. And the Board of Elections publishes by election district, there are about 4,000 of them at this point, election results. So we don't know how you voted, but we know how, the 300 or 400 people that live in your neighborhood voted. And when you meld all of these sources together, along with the contextual data that you get from the ACS on things like educational attainment, race and ethnicity, income, housing tenure, all of the factors that shape how people develop political interests and political attitudes, it becomes a very powerful data source. And we've managed to gather all of it from 2000 to the present. And in fact, the Board of Elections does not even archive its own data, as far as I can tell. So we are really the only source of this long history of civic engagement. And we also do surveys based on the voter file to find out what people are thinking, what issues they care about. My partner in all of this is Steve Romilewski. Many of you know his work. We provide interactive online maps of a lot of the things that we're analyzing. On the right-hand side is our map of the ranked choice voting results from the 2021 mayoral primary election for the Democratic candidates for mayor. We also have the controller candidates. And you can hover over your election district and click on it and see how the votes unfolded in your neighborhood as candidates were eliminated and votes were transferred. This is a really fantastic piece of mapping. And Steve has done many other very important pieces of work. In particular, as Jeff was reminding us, that the 2030 census is almost upon us. Steve has developed a national hard-to-count map to help localities predict where there's likely to be low self-response rates across the country. And many organizations all over the country have used this to target their activities in trying to get a complete count. And we know, obviously, the information is much better if people report it than if it has to be collected later by census people or even kind of interpolated from the surrounding area. So that activity is also rolled into a national redistricting map that Steve has developed so that people can look at proposed redistricting plans in their jurisdictions and compare the population compositions of both the existing districts and various proposed alternative districts. So that in a nutshell is what we do at the Center for Urban Research. Of course, we have 3,000 doctoral and MA students who are all doing projects, and a good share of them rely very heavily on census data, both the PUMS microdata and the tract level data. And we simply couldn't do what we do without having the foundational bedrock of the great data that the Census Bureau has collected. So we all owe them a great debt. Thanks.
Thank you, John. And finally, like to introduce Howard Shee, Assistant Director of Quantitative Research with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, or the AAJC.
All right. I want to thank Jeff Weiss and the New York Law School for hosting this event, and Joel and Erica for putting together this panel. Thank you for making me last and the person that's standing between lunch and all of you. So I'm going to do my best to speed through this. Time check. How are we doing on time? We're okay? All right. Great. So a little bit about Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization based in DC, founded in 1999. We work to advance human and civil rights for Asian Americans, as well as to promote a fair and equitable society for all. How we do this is through our different policy programs and activity areas. We do a lot of federal policy advocacy, just because we're based in DC, and work with a lot of our affiliate organizations to work on a wide range of issues. And we also work to empower and educate our own communities about these issues. You see them listed there in the gray blob all over there. I'll highlight the one on voting and census because that's been on one of our longer running programs and the one that I'm most attached to currently at the AAJC. We also do litigation. We have a team of lawyers who go and look for cases and opportunities to fight for human and civil rights for Asian Americans. We're looking at the alien land laws, for example, and things like that. And ACS actually plays a vital role in that because we can look at detailed levels of communities and see who are homeowners in certain areas and who could be potentially impacted by these alien land laws that are being enacted locally across the country. And then finally, we also have a network of community partners. And through that, we are able to do more local and state advocacy or assist them in doing the local and state advocacy. And one of the roles that I have there at AAJC is to provide access to services or educational and training opportunities to help our community partners access and utilize the data for their own advocacy purposes. So Joel asked, well, actually, let me step back and also make a quick plug for, I think we mentioned the State Data Center Network as well, and I want to plug the Census Information Center Network. These are both programs run by the Census Bureau. I encourage the Census Bureau to expand those programs because I think they're a great way to get organizations committed to engaging on ACS and census issues. And it was actually through that program where I gained a lot of my experience working with the Census Bureau when I first joined the Asian American Federation about 20 years ago. Yeah, oh my God, I'm so old. Yeah, so I do want to plug that for Census Bureau's staff that those programs are one of the cornerstones. I think along with the ACS Data User Program, it's really an opportunity to both engage with the Census Bureau, but also get people committed to participating in these programs. So Joel asked me to sort of talk a little bit about how the ACS data is so vital for the Asian American community. Well, I mean, the first is, I think, is important for all communities because ACS drives how federal funds are allocated, how federal policy decisions are being made, right? So making sure that all of our communities are participating in that process and then getting access to that data to understand how we can engage in how decisions are being made at the federal level is really important. But I think far more important for Asian American communities is that the ACS is one of the only sources where we have detailed disaggregated data on our communities, right? So I see a lot of familiar faces who have probably heard me talk about this a lot, but without that detailed level of data, we're unable to sort of fight against the model minority myth, right? So without ACS data, we wouldn't be able to show the diversity within our communities, the diversity of languages, the diversity of socioeconomic experiences. I think there was a time where we've looked at poverty data across Asian American communities, and it ranged from like 1 in 3 Bengalis in New York City were living in poverty compared to less than 10% of Japanese and Filipinos, right? So it's a huge range, a huge difference. And how do you serve those communities? What languages that those communities speak is really important. I think we also, stepping back to the federal policy level, right? A lot of the Section 203 determinations, I think your predecessor at city planning was instrumental in that process, where we were looking at figuring out, so Section 203 is race-based, but so you don't actually, the law doesn't actually specify what languages are covered. So I think we had to work with the city to sort of figure out, for South Asians, for example, what languages should be covered, right? And a lot of people will assume it's Hindi, but when you look at English language ability and cross that with the languages that are actually spoken, I think it came down to Bengali ended up being the language that was supported under the Section 203 coverage for South Asians, right? So you want to pay attention to so the ACS gives us the ability to say who's speaking what language, what is their English ability, and really serve the community, because you end up covering the rapidly growing Bangladeshi community within the New York City, which wouldn't have fallen under Section 203, only Asian Indian did, but because Bengali is spoken by both Asian Indians and by Bangladeshi, you end up having the data help serve the community much better. So I think I'll leave it at that, because I'm actually kind of looking forward to the panel discussion and the questions that Joel has prepared for us. So any questions, feel free to reach out, and thank you for having me.
Okay, great, this is working. We started a little bit late, so I think we're going to go a little bit longer with our some of the prepared questions that I have, and then open it up to audience questions. So let me just start by asking or saying, in this time of limited budgets and the pursuit of efficiencies in our federal government, it's important that end users, I think it's important that end users trumpet the value of the federal statistics that we all use. So to what extent, I ask the panel, to what extent are your colleagues and organizations aware of the value of ACS data and its importance to your work? And I know, Liz, this has come up recently for Liz, so let me, if you don't mind, let's start with you on this question.
I share private stories and he brings it up. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that city planning has been a partner of the WISE for many, many years. And you and your predecessors have been key in really enlightening both our staff and our executives, as well as our board and our executive board, of the importance of the ACS data. And as I told Joel a few minutes ago, I was late this morning because we had our first executive committee meeting for our board, and that's always really important to be at, the first one of the year. And so part of the process that we go through is talk about the successes of 2024, and then share with the board the demographics of our staff at every level. And so we went through a pretty long process with that. And then one of the board members asked, and so how does that compare to the city demographics? And our CEO said, I got that information last night. Here it is. So it was a good example of the importance of understanding where we are as an organization, both in terms of who we serve and who we are across the city, and looking not only at that aggregated level, but also within each of our communities. And we use the ACS data extensively. It is a journey, though, I will say. It's a great question because it's a journey. We are still teaching and still learning at all levels of the importance of that data.
That's great, and it's so impressive. You're such a big organization serving millions, and it's great to hear this use case. Anybody else on the panel want to comment on this one?
Well, there is a Census Funders Collaborative that has mobilized a lot of the power users and sort of vested interests that rely, institutional interests that rely heavily on census data to do things like write letters to congressional committees about the importance of funding the census. And it's always something that sort of hangs on by fingernails. So the more organizing, grassroots organizing to talk to your representatives, write letters to your representatives, let them know how important this is. I think congressional offices do read their mail, and if you happen to be at a forum where you're seeing one of your representatives, remind them to stand up for how important this is.
Thanks for that. That's a good reference to the Census Funders Collaborative. John, since you spoke up, let me ask you another question. So with this past election, we saw considerable shifts in New York City's political landscape, particularly in Hispanic neighborhoods across the city. Can you talk a little bit more about these changes and how the ACS contributed to your understanding?
Absolutely. So there was a pretty pronounced shift. It didn't surprise me. It was more or less in the order of magnitude that I expected, that President Trump would do better in 2024 than he did in 2020. We don't really know why. We know where and how, but not why. But being able to parse how different groups moved at some level of granularity helps us focus in on, what are the communities that did shift, and what do we know about their changing characteristics, and how can we go about asking them what it was about the situation that changed their thinking. The Trump campaign was pretty anti-immigrant, at least insofar as undocumented, unauthorized immigrants go. And it seems paradoxical that some of the immigrant communities of the city would shift towards Trump as a result of that. And just to give you an example, although we try to determine the ethnicity of individual voters by a distinctive surname analysis, but the tract level accounts of different ancestry and foreign-born groups and our ability to add up the votes at the tract level lets us do ecological regression analysis of how the observed shifts were associated with different patterns in the population. And the Dominican communities shifted most strongly towards Trump. Now, we have graduate students who are doing case studies of Dominican neighborhood politics and so forth, and there are sources of information that give us some ideas, but this would clearly be a very valuable research project to be able to track a community over time and ask people about why this changed. I will say that 4/5 of the shift that took place in New York City was not by people changing their mind. It was by positive growth of turnout for Trump and a substantial drop-off in turnout from groups that normally would vote Democratic. So it wasn't so much people changing their mind as people not being excited about voting for the Democratic candidate. And, in a predominantly Democratic town where Democratic office holders aspire to deliver for their communities and create a more equitable city, the fact that that message didn't seem to have the grip in 2024 that it had previously is something really worth thinking about and exploring.
Thanks very much. And I think you can see an interesting article. Your research was highlighted in the New York Times recently, sort of unpacking this, the work of Center for Urban Research, and this very interesting analysis that at its foundation, this is your just to clarify, you're linking the voter data with the ACS micro data, and that's how that ACS is foundational.
Well, we go back and forth between using the PUMS file, which allows you to do any, cross tabulation you want, or characterize all the different attributes of a given ethnic group. Most of those are not reported at the tract level, but at least we know population counts from different ancestry and place of birth groups. So we can, even though we don't know the ancestry of the voters, we know the characteristics of their neighborhoods. And so you can do ecological regression analysis to explore the statistical relationships. That doesn't tell you the causes necessarily, but it tells you the empirical associations.
Thank you. I want to bring up a topic that Donna mentioned earlier. Last year, the federal government adopted revised standards. The OMB, Office of Management and Budget, adopted revised standards for race and ethnicity data, OMB's Statistical Policy Directive 15 or SPD 15. Among the changes is a distinct Middle Eastern or North African category and a directive to collect and publish very detailed subcategories. So how important, I feel like race has come up for so many of our panelists as a key topic. How important is getting this updated information, this detail for the work that you do? Maybe we can start with Howard. It feels particularly relevant for the work that you do.
Sure. Thanks, Joel. I think for SPD 15, especially from the Asian American perspective, the new standard actually requires the collection of detailed ethnic data, detailed race and ethnic data. Before, it was sort of optional. Now, federal agencies are going to have to justify an opt-out if they choose not to, but I think advocates as well as people within the federal statistical community are going to be really pushing agencies to collect this data. And so, like I mentioned before, it's really important for Asian Americans to have access to disaggregated data on our communities because of the wide variety of experiences. So it's been it's been a long time coming. This is the first revision since 1997. And so just being able to adapt to the changing demographics of our communities is really important. I'll give you a quick example. In New York City, I think the fastest growing Asian ethnic populations were some of the smallest ones, and now are rapidly catching up. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Pakistan is about to catch the Japanese population, which were one of the largest groups within the Asian community. So it's really important to have this data.
Anyone else on our panel want to comment on this?
I'll add that from the vantage point of Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and working across city agencies, having that more fine-grained detail about the differences helps city agencies focus their projects and their initiatives more directly to the communities that most need it, instead of casting a broad net, really finding the right partners to help use our resources more effectively to improve the well-being of these communities.
It might be worth thinking about what's lost in the change as well. And there, the main topic of discussion among, academics who study and some advocates who study this sort of thing is that you lose the full racial diversity of people of Hispanic origin that the old method produced. And one of the reasons for the change was that many Hispanics didn't choose one of the traditional racial categories and chose some other race. There was a discussion of that earlier, and I think the Census Bureau and many demographers thought that some other race was too empty a category, and that the change would produce, as you say, much more definition of specific groups. But I'm wondering whether people who choose Hispanic as a race, to what extent will, if they are multiracial, if they're Asian or white or Black, whether they'll just leave it at choosing Hispanic now that they have a race category of their own and we'll lose some of that data. I think it's an issue worth watching.
So just to clarify on with this proposal, not only will there be a distinct Middle Eastern and North African category and all this extra detail that needs to be collected and published, there's also a unified race and ethnicity question where Hispanic respondents would respond to whether or not they identify as Hispanic on the same question where they're asked about race. And so I think, as I recall, I would ask the Census Bureau to confirm that, but their testing showed that there would be no statistically significant drop-off in, say, for example, those that identified as Afro-Latino. I don't know if we can get, if that's right, if you recall that Census Bureau, but yeah. Okay, that's all right. That's all right. But it will be interesting to see that because there's an incredible diversity in the Hispanic community, and that should not be lost in the course of asking this question. And we'll see as this, assuming this SPD 15 is embraced, what happens with that. Anything else you wanted to say on that, John? Yeah.
Well, the Census Bureau did test this very carefully, but it was a rather small scale test and in a specific place that wasn't necessarily,
right.
You know, the ones where you would worry about this the most.
Okay, let's ask a question, if you don't mind. I'm thinking, I have Ken in mind with this. Can you think of instances when you tried or wanted to use ACS data, but it wasn't up to the task? So you mentioned how there's 7,000 languages, an incredible diversity. I would argue that New York City is the most diverse city in the world.
Yes.
And so we love the American Community Survey, but there's limitations. Where do you run into those limitations?
Yeah, it's obviously a very robust data source, and we use it all the time. But because of the diversity across languages, it's a challenge because of timing, because of data size, like some data size for particular languages. So some of the challenges that we come across are more recent languages. So the recent arrivals who are coming, a lot of West African migrants, those languages are not captured as well, and certainly not in the time we need. So we have to look for other ways to collect that data. Then, you know, just with some of I'll say the language categories have improved over time. The 2016 changed the way that the language data was collected, you know, pulled out certain languages that had been grouped in larger categories like Bengali, Haitian Creole. So prominent languages here, but maybe not nationally. So that has evolved and it will continue to evolve. And you know, there's also some challenges too with aggregating, say, Chinese, all the different variations when we need to figure out how to advise agencies on what dialects, whether to use simplified or traditional Chinese. It's a challenge using the census data to provide a basis for that. You know, we can estimate time of arrival of certain communities from which nations and sort of as a proxy, but there are certainly still some challenges on that front.
It's so interesting. You brought up timeliness. So we have asylum seeking population here, significant population here in New York City, and this is a very recent phenomena. And we have the ACS that we're so used to leaning on for our most recent data. We don't have to wait every 10 years for it, but still not timely enough for, at least in terms of getting that understanding of very, very recent immigrants. So a victim of our own success, we want the data even sooner. Okay, let me ask one final question, and then I'll open up to audience questions. Do you have an ACS wish list? Is there one improvement that would make your work easier? Perhaps more detail in canned published tables, additional questions about remote work or gender identity or nativity of parents, and perhaps truly wishful thinking, but an increased sample size maybe, or more granular geographies. So what's top? One wish. Go ahead, John.
Well, parents' place of birth, which we had until 1970, is that correct? And we got an ancestry instead, which is a fuzzier category. And as intermarriage happens between more and more, I mean, one of the side effects of us being such a hyper diverse place is that we're getting interesting combinations that haven't been created anywhere else, both just in families, but also in neighborhoods. And it would be great to be able to explore that a little bit further.
I think that that's also acknowledgement of the value of SPD 15, that extra detail that will be reported, but it's also, it's a specific population, me included, the second generation. So I would welcome that question. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say the remote work is really an important piece for us because there's been a real shift in where people are living and working, right? And so our service to them is really important and based on where we are proximate to them. So remote work would really be helpful. I will give a shout out. It has nothing to do with ACS, but the census data ferret would be great to have back. I also think, and it's more around you and the city, but being able to pair the city data with ACS data, and I know you did, and I want to talk to you afterward about how you do it. It's challenging, right? So for us, it's challenging. It's also challenging for us when we're aggregating data into elected districts, whether it's city or state, federal. We use the zip code level, which is familiar for our teams and helpful because it's a larger size. But there are some pieces that would be more helpful.
Yeah, it's a tempting geography that we, in size, it's akin to our, if you're familiar with it, neighborhood tabulation areas, and it is a tempting one because it has resonance with the general population. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll jump in and say sample size is probably one of the things that we really would like to see increase, especially as our population keeps growing, with the sample size staying relatively the same. I think there was one bump up maybe 4 or 5 years ago or something like that, but just making sure we keep pace with the growing population. And that obviously for smaller populations has a really huge impact on getting high quality data, for smaller Asian communities and things like that.
And I'll add to that, while sample size remains constant and our population is growing, we're also seeing final responses decrease. And so the reliability of the ACS takes a hit from that because, maybe it's a result of survey fatigue, but we're seeing a drop in that from some of the work that we were analyzing. So, yeah, go ahead.
I would add sample size relative to our needs around language granularity. I think also, just as a broad statement, like and for future data collection, addressing the language barriers in data collection, because of folks are not participating in the process, then they're not being represented in samples. And so I think the Census Bureau along with city planning, did a great job in advance of the decennial census, both in getting more accurate data on buildings and housing, and then just with the outreach, which is very extensive, especially at a time back then and maybe again, like when folks with language barriers are sort of more in the shadows. So being very, being not exactly oversampling, but finding ways to ensure that there's greater participation for those who have language barriers.
Great point. Okay, we're running out of time, so I really want to open it up to audience questions. If you can approach one of the microphones if you have a question, and Erica, if you're monitoring, nothing coming in, but if you're watching virtually, you can feel free to write in questions, and we can ask those as well. We can hear those.
Yes. Hi, panel. This is for Mr. Lowe. We've heard a lot about the outreach in languages other than the dominant language. But as we all know, perhaps the major integrating factor for new immigrants is learning proficiency in the dominant language. Is your office work on that side of the coin or only on the outreach to the new languages that new immigrants are bringing in?
I appreciate the question. It's every migrant journey or immigrant journey is different. Language learning on an individual basis is different. Our office does support English language learning. We have a program called We Speak, and working through community organizations and libraries, providing a curriculum. It's also online. And the city also supports English language learning classes through DYCD, the Department of Youth and Community Development. That said, the demand for English language learning classes and the funding available, maybe 5% of the demand is being funded. So there is absolutely a need for more classes. The folks who want to learn English, there need to be more resources. But also, a lot of these individuals have a lot of other challenges that they're facing as they want to learn. That said, our office is trying to fill the gap from across that whole continuum of language ability.
I think it would be also nice to hear from Liz about the YMCA. I think has a role too in adult literacy programs. Is that am I right with that or no? Is it? Yeah, you want to mention because it's.
I think Ken is right. We have what we call a New American Initiative, and we teach many different either workforce development, English language learning, American citizenship. And our classes are at capacity. We are using ACS data to figure out where we need to open new centers. It's a challenge because we don't have the full resources as well as the city to meet the demand, but it is one of the big programs that we do. And we do a lot of fundraising around it so that we can expand the program. Yep.
Thanks. Next question.
These are very tall.
Sorry about that.
Okay. I'm Martha Norick. I work at the Office of Data Analytics at the city. So we support a lot of the community of practice of data and analytics professionals across the city. And we sometimes see very creative applications of census data, let's say. I'm not going to name any names or shout out anybody using data in ACS data in ways that I know, Joel, you think about this a lot, how to help people understand the margins of error and what it means and what you can rely on and what's not. And I wondered if you have any tips for working with your colleagues who are maybe less fluent in the language of statistics to explain sort of ways that ACS data is appropriate to use and ways that, might be kind of leading you down the garden path of false precision or sort of letting you draw conclusions that maybe are not actually supported by the data.
Thank you so much for that question. It's a question that I was worried I wouldn't be able to get to, but I think that it's important for your audiences, if you're the intermediary, as a data analyst, for your audiences to understand that there's uncertainty in all data, and the trick is understanding the data limitations so that you're using it responsibly. So, yeah, how do you communicate data uncertainty to those who are relying on your analyses? Anybody?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think it's important to distinguish between the audiences that you're trying to reach out to, right? So if you somebody who is a data user and a little bit more sophisticated, you want to explain to them how to incorporate, the variance of the data. So one favorite measure that I use is coefficient of variance, just to figure out whether or not this particular estimate that you're working with is going to radically change from year to year just because of sample size, right? So you want to make sure you're not making policy decisions based on something that is has a lot of uncertainty to it, right? So if, for example, if a community meets a particular threshold, poverty threshold, for example, just throwing it out there, 1 year, if you have a high coefficient of variance, you risk having that community fall out of eligibility, right? So you want to make sure whether you do the 5-year average for more stability in estimates, and so you're making policy decisions based on a much more stable number. Then again, you definitely as an analyst want to make sure you are doing the analysis, but when you're talking to the general public, perhaps you don't need to, as long as you know that your number is going to be stable, is not going to come back and bite you in the next year when you do the same presentation and you have a completely different number, right? So you internally have done the analysis, but you don't necessarily have to tell everybody, oh, every time you provide a margin of error and that kind of thing. You just want to make sure you focus your message depending on the audience.
Right. I remember meeting with your colleague, Steve Romoleski, way back when we were first getting the 5-year period estimates from the ACS. And we were brainstorming about ways to represent the uncertainty in maps, and we were coming up with some very ugly maps, and it was incredibly distracting. So if you kind of control for that beforehand and let the end user kind of forget about that uncertainty, you're accounting for it, then that is a good solution. Next question.
Sydney Parker, New York State Independent Redistricting Commission, and Boys Bunch Center for Public Policy, Medgar Evers College. My question relates to pairing election data with census data. Pairing election data with census blocks, no brainer. Pairing census tracts with election data, a little more difficult because election districts, some can fall within the census tract, some can fall outside of the census tract. So my question is more to Dr. Mollenkoff. You mentioned that you use the voter registration file, geocoding addresses. Are you using that to determine where the population is in that election district that falls outside of the census tract? Because we know a census tract, you could have a park in that census tract. I remember you with Dr. John Flateau when we was in that meeting when I was at the City Districting Commission.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Flateau.
Dr. Flateau. Yeah, it's been a while.
I was John's dissertation advisor.
Yeah, I know that. I know that. Yeah. So, the question is how do you determine where the population resides in that census tract in terms of apportioning it to what election district when they overlap boundaries?
Can I just add to that, if you don't mind? Because I feel like this is a challenge that a lot of us deal with, mismatches between your statistical geographies, the data that we're getting, the ACS, and say, for example, like election districts. But please do go ahead and address specifically.
So we use the city's geocoding engine, which has evolved to take into account all the weird things that we do in New York City, like having addresses like 53-4498th Street in Queens, and also the different ways that people might record road, RD, et cetera. It does now it does a very good job in geocoding the voter file, and the Board of Elections is also finally really becoming digitized, and so their addresses are much cleaner. And so we're getting about like a 98, 99% success rate in geocoding the voter file. And so we know the exact street segment that you live on, and we can attribute the vote of your election district to that, for people who actually voted, to that address, and then we can add them back up by any geography we want, including census tracts. And census tracts change a bit from decade to decade, but in the main, they're much more stable than a lot of other geographies. That's why we use them as our basic unit. But if you want to get in touch with me outside the meeting, I'm happy to. I don't live too far from Medgar Evers College. I'll come over and chat with you guys and your team and see how we can help.
Okay, thank you. I'm also on the New York State Independent Redistricting Commission too. So, both gigs. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank
Glad
you
to
for your
have you
question.
on.
Anybody else want to
For your service.
Anybody else want to follow up with this question, this challenge when you're trying to match geographies? No? Okay. Any other? Oh, we've got a question over
Hi,
here.
my name is Craig. Mr. Shi, you addressed the Japanese and the Filipino populations. I wanted to ask you regarding the Japanese. Do you get any assistance from the Japanese government, and is there anything further they could be doing? And in regards to the Filipinos, I've observed that a large Filipino population, for example, is in Honolulu. Do you cross-reference with groups, allied groups, let's say in Honolulu, regarding the Filipino population?
I have to talk to the people that run our community partners. I'm sure they have groups that are spread across the country that work with communities at the local level. In terms of the embassy, we don't particularly work with foreign governments per se, because our focus is on policies that impact Asian Americans rather than Asians in general. I know that but I do know just offhandedly that most of the embassies are pretty active with the people that are, their nationals that are within the community. And I know there are different events and interactions and things like that. And I don't know if they fund particular groups to provide services or anything like that. So I'm less sure about how the embassies interact with direct service providers and things like that. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, let's go over here and then.
Hi, I'm Richard DeSalvo. I'm at the Independent Budget Office. And so regarding the race categories, one issue perhaps that comes up is it appears from some of our analysis that the other race category, the 2 or more race category, is increasing in New York City. And this complicates thinking about trends within race. So for example, like if you look at the trend within, say, the Black community or the white community or the different communities, because some of those people might be moving to other categories over time as you run the ACS. Compositional change, essentially. So I was just curious from a technical perspective, what kind of data analysis one could do to try to make those more interpretable. Like to clarify, if you look at a table, you're like, well, this other race category has risen by 10 percentage points, say, over some time period. And like that makes it difficult to interpret, say, like the average number of children among, say, the Black community or the number of white community. So
Can I, if I could jump in to say, it is incredibly challenging, especially when you have a moving target, right? So we had a different race and ethnicity set of race and ethnicity questions asked in 2010 than were asked in 2020, and now we've got SPD 15, and so potentially can have this new set of questions or new question, unified question for 2030. And so it is very challenging to look at this, the two or more races or multiracial category because we're doing a little bit of apples to oranges comparison. I think that you have to squint and keep that in mind. We don't have an easy answer like margins of error, but you have to have in mind that this is not, they're not perfectly equivalent questions, and that really colors your interpretation of the change, especially here in New York City, of those identifying as two or more. But you also put your finger on something else, that it's not a longitudinal survey, and so we don't have the sense of people that have evolved, have different conceptions of their identity between the different questionnaires too. So that's long-winded way of saying, at least from my perspective, it's very hard to disentangle. Yeah.
Yeah, I came across, or somebody sent me a paper that was analyzing, I don't know, John, if you're familiar with this one, where they did an analysis of the 2020 census, and they were kind of questioning, sorry, Census Bureau, but they were questioning how the Census Bureau processed some of the multiracial data. I don't know if you remember that piece. Was it from?
Andy has weighed in on some of these things.
Okay, right, yeah. Right.
Right.
If you fill in an answer that they decided is multiracial. And the second point is that they use basically country of origin. So for examples are including on the screen. One is you're a black person from South Africa. You're a white person from South Africa. So you check white, write in South Africa, they make you black white. You're a black Brit, you're black and you're British. You check black, and if you say you're British, they'll make you black white. And then the topper is if you're white and you mark white, but you're Hispanic. You mark white, you mark Hispanic, and then you write in Cuban, they make you white and another race. I kid you not. This is, if you want to look at the codes they're using, they're in PL 94, 71, and they go on and on. There's thousands of them.
Also just to disentangle this a little bit for the audience, that with this, as I had mentioned before, there's a change in the questionnaire, and for the first time. Right. And so now for the first time you get a chance, if you self-identify as white or black, you get a chance to write in your detail.
And from survey methods point of view, that's called the demand effect. In other words, they kind of demanded to write something in. So the number of people who wrote something in is massive, and it's very different. We only looked at the count, but the brilliance of the STAR paper is that they related it to they compared the 2019 to the 2021 ACS. So you have ancestry both times. So you can see what actually happened. And they're refusing, the Bureau has refused to do any crosswalks. This came up with a CSAC-B. They said they won't. So there's no way to crosswalk back to the old race categories. So we don't know really how much more multiracial the U.S. is getting.
I do think, just to quickly wrap up, just so that we can get to our final question. But I do agree that it's very important that we have a sense of these crosswalks, and I do believe that the Census Bureau is pursuing a publication of that. Yeah, I see some nodding heads. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Sandra. I'm from the Mingwan Center for Community Action in Flushing, Queens. Several people brought up the question today about synchronizing census data, voter data, election districts. Are there concerns about combining those two resources together, knowing that data can be politicized and it can expose some vulnerable communities? Right now, we're seeing, perennial conversations, politicization of like inclusion of the citizenship question, exclusion of undocumented people in the census count. So it's 2025 now. 5 years from now, what can groups do to make sure there's a full and fair, accurate count in New York State?
Yeah, John, you want to?
Well, in 2020, the city issued $19 million worth of contracts to trusted partner community organizations through a process in which the community organizations submitted fairly detailed proposals. There was an internal review panel with some external people. I happened to participate in the process. The city itself also spent roughly the same amount on advertising through its own channels like the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. And I think New York City spent more money looking for a full count than by far than any other jurisdiction in the country. And it's not an issue that's sort of a campaign item for 2025, but let's hope that the mayoral election results in an administration that will take this seriously. As Jeff said earlier, we could lose a lot if we don't have a good count. And so you should lobby your organization to speak out on behalf of a similar effort for 2030.
I agree. I think that again, the work that you and Steve Romoleski are doing, these to publish response rates, because the worst thing that can happen to a community is that you don't respond to the census. That's where we start to get omissions and undercounts. And so with that outreach effort is incredibly important. It's important for the city to get behind it. It's important for community activists to get behind that. And that work, I think, starts early. Getting that work out, and that can make a change. You can see, like with, for example, Dominican community here in New York City really bucks national trends and has incredible response rates to the census, and consequently, we have a better count for it. So yeah, incredibly important, starts now.
Yeah, I will just add, it's from the Immigrant Affairs Office, of course, it's important. Thinking with the last census, we really appreciated the leadership that city planning took. They want accurate data. They want representation, and started planning years in advance to do that. And then, especially with the Mayor's Office of Census, doubled down on making sure that all the communities were being contacted and brought into the fold. So certainly hope that's something that will continue to advance.
Yeah, I'm going to just step up to wrap up, but yes, go ahead.
All have a state strategy as well. There are funders across the state and community-based organizations interested in doing this. And Sol Jones from the New York Community Trust, Eve, Mertz Gilmore is in the room, the New York Civic Engagement Table. There's many of us trying to do this at the state level. This is going to be a state effort. It has to be. New York City is really important to that. Of course, we all know because you're the largest population center. But if Buffalo and Syracuse and Rochester don't do it as well, we all lose. So the important message is we all have to be one state. We all have to be behind this, and we need the governor's office. Thank you to New York City for paving the way for that.
Okay, well, that concludes our panel session. Thank you to all of our panelists for great contribution.
It's great to see you, man. It's seeing you too.
And thank you for some great audience
No, I'm still
questions.
living-
And we're going to take a little break. I'm gonna.
Joel, can I just?
Oh, yeah,
Actually,
sure.
I want to do a promo for city planning. After every decennial census, they put out a publication called The Newest New Yorkers. It's in the works right now. Share, would you mind just holding up, or someone hold up? So this is from the last census. I believe that this should be coming out this year. Not to put any pressure on you guys, but it's a wonderful document. I hope everyone takes a look at that when it does come out.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, I hope that the next iteration of that Newest New Yorkers publication will come out later this year. And so let me hand it over. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Just a little announcement. So because our panel, first, let's give a thanks to our panel. Really terrific. Because we've gone over a little bit in time, we're gonna take a break from now until 12:30 and then come back, and we're gonna do 6 breakout groups. They're gonna be really big, but we're gonna look to ask you some questions about what you want to see in ACS data and how, Census Bureau can support that. So the way it's gonna work, it's gonna be a little bit wonky, but we're gonna do sort of like a line. And we're going to just try to divide ourselves into 6 groups. So we'll ask you to kind of help with that. But from
somebody that knows about redistricting that can help with it.
we want to make this really scientific. We'll trust the citizens in this case. So we'll ask you to kind of assemble into 6 groups, kind of in those rows. But for right now, from now until 12:30, help yourself to lunch and then come back and get prepared to tell us what you want and need. So thank you. Perfect. All right, everyone should have wrapped up. Is that true? Is there any groups still working? Okay, so now I'd like to invite one person from each of the tables to give a quick wrap up of main themes, what they heard, what they learned. It doesn't necessarily have to be the facilitator or the note taker. It could be another volunteer from a table. So, okay, let's start over with, how about the table in the back? Donna's table. Is there anyone who'd like to volunteer and give some closing comments? All right. Do you want a mic, Donna? It's faint. It's a big room. Yeah. Ah.
Okay, so we just had a really nice conversation over here about, the data users and what they use the data for. I think that I don't know that I found any real common themes, but the fact that we had a whole conversation about redistricting and how helpful ACS is with that. We also talked about, what else did we talk about? We talked about GIS and mapping, and we talked for a long while about the new race standards that are going to be coming out and how the ACS will be implementing those and things like that. So it was really a nice conversation, but I think that everybody got a lot out of the conversation, I think. Yes? And what's that? For what? To what?
She said something about improving the way something showed up in the Esri stuff.
Oh, the Esri stuff, right. So we have a partnership with the Esri staff. Well, it's a company, and every time that we release data within 24 hours, Esri has it up in their Living Atlas, which is a really nice product set for, the public. And so, but one thing we did, I got some feedback that I'm going to share with Esri about some of their user friendliness of some of
Excellent.
their maps.
Good.
Yeah.
We're helping
So we're
lots
gonna
more
help
people
Esri.
beyond the
Right.
circle. Great.
Yes.
Great. Donna, do you want to pass that to Noemi and Noemi's table?
So better filtering, make it a little bit easier and a little bit faster to get stuff. Better advanced user support. A lot of people here are advanced users, so they want more help. Some people are getting different results for depending on their queries. Like they'll do 2 or 3 different queries and get different answers. Let's see, information about OMB and their counties being different than the metro areas, which I wasn't sure, but we have to kind of look into that. Oh, for the decennial, updated numeration rates and self-response rates quicker so that people can plan faster. That's really important. More info on ACS response rates. And this was my favorite one, downloading maps with the data already joined to the geographies. So that was a big wish list. Anything else that I might have missed? No? Okay. That was it.
Great. If you want to pass it then to Jolie and Lisa.
Who's Jolie?
Right there. Yep.
Okay, here's where our group talked about, we had a group of mixed backgrounds, foundation backgrounds, criminal justice backgrounds, and different levels of data users. So we're looking at, one of the things that really came up that was interesting was how these groups could maybe better promote response rates for government surveys overall and the ACS. How do we tie, when we do that large outreach for the decennial, to sometimes the ACS following up and making sure that people are continuing to respond, maybe how to better target outreach with partners to get people to respond to ACS. And a lot of feedback on the one pager, noting that it was definitely better for maybe newer users. People really like table numbers. Maybe there's a way to add some table numbers to those overarching categories. And the use of ACS data, not just from the platforms that the Census Bureau provides, but getting from many of our third-party users who are then disseminating back out data in the form of digests. Did I miss anything? Okay.
Great.
Lots of insight here.
Thank you. All right, so I guess Lillian's table is next.
I learned a lot of things. One of them was that the New York City Department of Planning mapping and data is really helpful to people. The next thing I learned was the Census Bureau email updates are helpful, but that actually people will take that relevant information from those email updates for their organization and sort of create their own newsletter. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm trying to think of the other things. Our whole table was really happy about the mapping capabilities in data.census.gov. And I think that is it. Also the flyer seemed helpful, especially with the 1-year supplemental estimates. So a lot of people learned about that data product today.
Thanks. I think we can pass it to Mark and then.
Yeah, so we had a pretty tech savvy group here. We had lots of people who were using, accessing the ACS using R and Tidy Census and PUMS for things like older adult well-being and caregiving, labor force patterns, migrant characteristics. And one of the suggestions for the Census Bureau is to use ChatGPT or some of the other new AI tools that are out there to basically integrate that into the Census Bureau site to be able to answer data user questions. And rather than drawing from all of the misinformation that might be out there, it could be just drawing from within the Census Bureau's knowledge base and give them either the data or answers to questions that they might have.
Great, thank you. And I think it's probably our table next. Joel, do you want to give a recap? Perfect.
I'll try, but jump in if I get something wrong. Okay. So we've got sort of a mix in terms of how often people are using ACS data. Some of the reasons that they're using it are to answer policy questions and see shifts through time. We access through all kinds of different ways. We access the data through IPUMs and PUMs and the API, data.census.gov, and just the standard profiles. We use SPSS, R, ArcGIS, Python, SQL, and even Excel to work with ACS data. There's been some trouble here and there accessing the data. Someone has seen odd formatting in the order of variables when downloading at a given point in time from data.census.gov. Not many of us really are using the margins of error. And what terms do we find challenging, like CVs and I guess terms like tenure can be tricky, and we just, when communicating with others, we just kind of dumb it down and use terms like owner occupied. Trouble explaining 5-year data? Yes. And mostly we kind of try to avoid the issue. Yes, a lot of people have used the Census Bureau website, find the technical documentation a little bit tricky. And half of the group gets Census Bureau emails. Is this okay level of detail? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. Oh, looking the feedback on the flyer, if we could simplify it a little bit on the ACS, that would be good. Lots of text, maybe fewer sentences, more visuals. And then feedback from, let's see, those that are members of the ACS community, only 3. Some of us didn't know about it. Some of us just learned. Perfect, let's see, some ideal tools. Social media for ACS, developer documentation, better developer documentation, need tools for intermediate to advanced users. Let's see, anything else I want to share would be good. Again, that AI topic came up for us, incorporating AI into the Census Bureau website, transparency and how the Census Bureau prioritizes their development, I guess, for the site.
Great, thank you. That was really, really helpful. I think it's helpful to hear how each conversation was a little different as well. I think the general consensus is how much we all appreciate the data. And because we appreciate and use the data, we think it can be even better. Thank you all for staying and for participating and giving all of this valuable feedback to us. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to now turn it over to Jeff for some closing parting thoughts.
Hey, well, thank you all for being with us for the better half of today for about 4.5 hours. Just a few housekeeping things. I am going to send out to everybody who registered a complete set of the PowerPoint presentations and a link to the recording so you can share that with your organizations and constituencies. Also, my institute here at New York Law School sends out a weekly update on activity in election law, census, redistricting, and voting rights, election administration. So if you don't receive it already, either give me your business card as you're walking out today, or in the follow-up email with the slides and the other materials, there'll be a link to sign up for the newsletter. And just to let you know that Alexis Marking, a graduating third-year law student, here at New York Law School does most of the writing with me. I mostly do the editing and final touches to it, but we do send something out every Monday. So please let us know. So again, thank you very much. We will have continued programming. We're looking at doing a New York City session in the spring on reactivating the network in the 5 boroughs that Mayor de Blasio's office had put together. We're looking at doing a similar conference to this in September or October in Albany, New York, if you have affiliates around New York State. And we are going to continue all the way past 2030 to make the census permanent. So I want to thank all of you again for coming, and thank you especially for those who helped put this together and fund it and organize it. We are done. Thank you.